Is it actually all a massive fad?
I personally don't agree with a lot of what's trending around this topic right now.
And I've been training and eating for my cycle, but is it all completely pointless?
There are a lot of people drawing conclusions and making recommendations based on very little science.
Well, not quite. Natasha has posted this video breaking down the science behind training around your menstrual cycle. And I think it's really important that we're aware that there isn't a lot of research yet that has been done to confirm a lot of the things that are out there on the internet. And while I think in the video she's referring to a lot of the videos that are prescribing specific exercise styles for different stages of your menstrual cycle, rather than like a generalized overview, which is kind of what I follow, I think this is really important, and it really highlights the reason we need to be aware of these fads and trends that come up on places like TikTok. I've been training and eating around my cycle for the last 6 months to maybe a year. Natasha touches on the fact that there isn't any research showing that there is any change in strength gains or muscle growth at different stages of our cycle. It's very clear to me that during certain stages of my cycle I will get negative impacts if I train in a certain way. It wasn't until I started eating slightly more around my luteal phase that I started to feel comfortable with food again. And having recovered from eating disorders and struggled with food a lot over the years, once I started to eat for my cycle and validate the fact that in my luteal phase I'm definitely a lot hungrier and that I potentially burn more calories, eating in that way for me has had a significant impact on the difference in my training and how recovered I feel, but also how healthy I feel and how happy I feel either side of my training. So I'm going to the gym. I'm currently in my late follicular phase, which my Whoop tells me over the next few days my strain will begin to diminish as I approach ovulation, and I find that to be personally true, and that is also confirmed in Natasha's video when she talks about our rate of perceived exertion being higher and maybe our energy levels being lower. So at the moment I'm finding high intensity really good fun, really enjoyable, and I don't feel as exhausted as I do later on in my cycle. When I'm in my luteal phase I start to feel really tired. If I go really intense in CrossFit then I feel a massive dip in energy for the rest of the day and I experience more DOMS, more soreness, more fatigue generally. But while I'm in my luteal phase I'm going to make the most of training to that high intensity and going after it and lifting those heavy weights. This is the time that I can do it and I don't have that massive fatigue at the end of the day, and my body takes it the best during my follicular phase. So I do CrossFit, and in CrossFit you don't really have the opportunity to change the kind of training you're doing because of the phase of your cycle that you're in. But one thing I do is I will increase or decrease my intensity. So on a day that I'm in my luteal phase I'll say I can go to about 60%, and I can go more than that if I want to, but I will allow myself to put less intensity and less effort into the workout because I know that my recovery is going to be worse and I'm going to feel generally worse if I go really intense. Whereas in my luteal phase, which I'm in right now, I allow myself to go full throttle. Obviously not 100% every single day because that is not healthy to do, but I do allow myself to go hard, and I use these days throughout my follicular phase to go hard and go heavy, and that is just what works best for me. But it was something that was backed up by what Natasha was saying, and a lot of the other data was based on whether muscle growth is like the most optimal and other factors to do with like changing your body or driving for things like muscle growth or fat loss, that kind of thing. And for me, I don't train for that at all. I don't train to change my body. I don't train to look a certain way. I train for health and happiness and fitness, and strength is not the highest on my list. It's just like a happy bonus. Like, I'm not training to be the strongest ever, although it is cool to feel strong and I am the strongest I've ever been. That isn't my main goal. My main goal is like health and happiness. For me, I find that training in sync with my cycle is best for my health and my happiness, and if I ignore it completely then I do suffer. I feel less healthy, I feel more drained and less able to do the stuff that I want to do in my life. So it makes sense for me to train within my cycle, and it might make sense for you too, but what you've got to do is you've got to figure out what that looks like for you and how your cycle affects your individual training, because everybody's training could be different. I do CrossFit and weightlifting and a little bit of swimming and some other bits on the side, but you might be doing like yoga and more like bodybuilding style training, or running or road cycling. There's a whole plethora of sports out there. It could be very different for you. One thing that Natacha does miss out, and there are studies on this, is that just after ovulation, some hormones enter your system that can have an impact on ligaments and tendons and our mobility and flexibility that can actually lead to a higher injury risk. I really recognise this, and this is something that I highlighted within myself, but didn't realise there was any research out there on it because I'm so hyper aware of my cycle. Day 15 kept coming up where I felt really bendy, like my limbs felt more mobile than usual, like hypermobile, but to a point where it didn't feel like a safe range of motion. And I do Olympic weightlifting, which is really high skill, really technical, and it involves a lot of mobility. But if you overextend, say, your elbow when you're lifting a barbell overhead, that can be quite dangerous. On those days when I had more mobility than normal, it felt more unsafe than usual. And I also noticed a lack of coordination during the day after ovulation, that day 15. And I noticed a spike in anxiety. And honestly, that day is just utter hell for me, and I don't really know why. But through looking into it, that is when the hormones start to shift and change a lot more, and you're entering into that next phase of your cycle. And I think that's really important to note if you are in a sport like Olympic weightlifting or CrossFit, where that can have a big impact on your sport and how you perform in your sport. Whereas if you are, say, like bodybuilding or doing resistance training but on machines that are slightly safer, you're not doing like high intensity weightlifting, that might be a lower risk of injury if you're hypermobile. So that might not be an issue for people that are like regular gym goers. Natacha brings up inter-individual variation quite a lot, and that comes up a lot in the papers and studies as well. And I think that's super important, that we are aware of ourselves and how different things impact us. But she does also say regarding her own performance and training that she doesn't let it distract her, which to me doesn't necessarily sound like listening to your body. It sounds more like ignoring certain signals from your body than listening to them. I personally like to be hyper aware of what's going on with my body. I don't try and ignore it and shut it down. And that's really important for me because in the past I've had such a toxic relationship with exercise, and part of repairing that is listening to the signals that my body is giving me. And because I'm not training for optimal performance, I'm training for health and happiness and not changing my body shape in any way, it's more important for me to look after my body and my health than it is to push through and keep grinding. If I listen to how I'm feeling, I feel a lot better if I do something like swimming or walking or something that's like slightly lower intensity later on in my cycle, instead of pushing myself through a savage CrossFit session. Because I could do it and it would suck. It feels worse when I'm there, but not only that, it feels way worse when I get back. And the tiredness that I would normally feel, say, in the early stages of my cycle is dramatically exacerbated if I train to a really high intensity when I'm in the later stages of my cycle. I have noticed since I've been listening to my body more, I've been PBing more. My body is better recovered because I'm reducing my training intensity throughout my luteal phase. And in the last couple of months, I've literally PB'd all of my lifts. I ended up cleaning 110 kilos the other day in my last video, jerked 100 kilos for the first time. I PB'd my back squat by a ridiculous amount. I did like 3 reps at 130 and my 1 rep max is supposed to be 132 kilos. But honestly, I believe it's from listening to my body and resting adequately. I don't think we should use lack of research as a reason to not listen to our body and how we want to train throughout our cycle. I believe we should do what is right for us and use ourselves as a bit of a science experiment and see how we feel when we train to different intensities and record what we find and figure it out from there. I don't think we need someone to prescribe it to us, whether it's based on science or not, because many of us as individuals are not full-time athletes. Many of us have regular jobs. I'm a teacher, and a lot of us are juggling trying to train and family life and the struggles of doing it all at once around trying to fit in some kind of fitness routine that fits with us, and that is so hard. If you want to know more about how I balance my life and training and how I fit working out alongside a full-time job, watch this video right here next. Please fist bump that like button if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.